Coffee tables. They're a staple in almost every household. They can take on many forms. They serve as a communal gathering place and a surface for food, drink, and work. But because they all exist to fulfill this simple purpose, they've become seemingly predictable, beautiful, but boring. Today, I want to change that. I'm going to build a coffee table with an element of surprise. In order for this coffee table to be more functional than the others, there are 3 big upgrades I want to make. 1. I want the coffee table to have integrated lighting so it's easier to read, draw, or play games on. 2. The coffee table should be able to easily hide any messes or scattered objects. 3. The hidden feature. I started this project in the spring, which was my last term of my junior year of college. It had been quite a long winter of not building anything, and I needed to get my hands dirty again. So I came up with a plan. I wrote a proposal to do a 4-credit independent study where I design and build a coffee table. And let's just say, it got approved. So with one less in-person class, I had the time to drive back to Portland on the weekends, which is where all of my tools live. I also met weekly with my design professor to show him my progress on the table. I get a lot of questions in the comment section about what I study in school. I'm studying product design, which is also commonly called industrial design. It's the closest major I could find to what I was already doing here on YouTube. Perhaps in a future video, I'll talk more about my experience of college and how it's shifted my perspective. Following the theme of my last video, where I built this bed with a mountain-inspired headboard, I wanted this coffee table to follow similar nature-inspired visual cues. So I cut the edges of these maple boards to mimic a live edge. I looked at the channels that streams carved in the ground, and the crooked paths that oak branches take. All of the boards for the tabletop cut, it was time to get to work on the base. Now the base has to be rather large to accommodate the hidden feature and internal mechanisms which you'll later see. So with the help of my dad, we ripped down a full sheet of plywood for the base. The top of the table is going to be the focus of the design, so I wanted the base to take a backseat visually. I decided to go for large radius corners, so I got to work marking out the kerf cuts that would allow me to bend this plywood.
Okay, let's test this out. Oh man. Every single time I try to do these kerf cuts, I don't do enough of them because we want this to be 90 degrees. I'm gonna add twice as many cuts. I'm just gonna do one in between each of these, and hopefully that should solve our issue here. Oh man. I've been kind of winging this part of the build, so I didn't exactly plan this part out. I have a slight issue, which is that this piece of wood is not long enough to go all the way around the perimeter of the base. Even though I used the full 8-foot length of plywood, it's still not enough.
It's not enough!
So I'm really gonna have to get creative here, patching together pieces of wood.
As I got to work patching together plywood with the domino jointer, I was reminded just how much design and fabrication is a muscle that needs to be exercised. I hadn't built something in months and I felt rusty. Not rusty in the hard skills of using each tool, but rusty in the ability to make decisions quickly and problem solve. If I haven't built something in a while, the amount of time I spend standing and just staring at the project increases, and each decision takes longer to reach.
So now that this piece that I've spliced together is dry, I need to figure out how to attach this to the end so I can extend the length of this entire section.
After making the curve cuts on this extension piece, I then dominoed it to the larger piece of plywood. Problem solved.
Come on, man. There we go.
Now this is by far the largest curve bent assembly I've done.
Put these dominoes in here.
And the larger it gets, the harder it is to glue up without accidentally cracking one of the corners. I made sure to take my time with this one.
Now I have to clamp this together. These are clamps. They move like this.
Table looks so weird.
My table looks weird?
Bathtub.
My table looks like a bathtub, yeah. Eventually it won't.
What? Is that a clamp too?
It's just a bigger one. And then I have another one right here. There we go. Okay, so it definitely has a little bit of flex. That's not fantastic.
I decided to see how the table would look with the top boards on the base, and I realized I'd made a bit of an oversight.
Oh shoot. I think I miscalculated here because there's no overhang on this side. And this side the overhang is only about 2 inches. I mean, it looks pretty good. I think I may need to make an entire new board. So instead of 4 planks on the top, there's gonna be 5. And that would give me enough overhang on both sides. But that's gonna mean that instead of 2 planks rising with the motors, it's gonna have to be 3. A little bit bigger than I anticipated, but I think we're just gonna have to roll with the punches. The base looks a little bit too chunky if there's no overhang.
In order to widen the tabletop, I needed to cut one more plank. So I glued the 2 boards together, overlapping about 1 inch, drew my curve, and by cutting through both layers at the same time, I get 2 boards that have the exact same contour. Pretty satisfying. This coffee table is one of the more complicated projects I've taken on, and there's a lot of things to keep track of. So I want to show you exactly how I keep everything organized so I don't lose my mind. I use Millinote, which happens to be the sponsor of today's video. And I'm going to show you exactly how I use Millinote to make these projects possible. I've been using Millinote for years to organize my projects. I love it because it allows me to gather inspiration, sketches, and create lists all in one place. I like to think of it as an online corkboard. I started planning this project by adding my initial sketches on the main board. It's really nice to see all my sketches in one place. I also added some images of my old designs that I want to reference so that this table feels visually cohesive with the rest of my work. The other super handy feature of Millinote is to-do lists. I use that to write tasks and keep track of my progress. I also created a shopping list for materials and supplies that I need to buy for the project. Next, I created this sub-mood board and I gathered a bunch of images to guide the aesthetic direction of this piece. For example, I created this area for existing furniture that has hidden compartments. I also placed some images of natural contours that I could reference for the top of the table. I also made a column for lighting inspiration, which I can reference later in this build. Millinote lets you add these notes and link them to images, which I find to be a fast and easy way to remind myself of what I was thinking in the moment.
Often I'll find an image because I like something very specific about it, and it's not very useful if I don't write it down. I can also add images on my phone on the Milanote app, which is awesome because it allows me to photograph my sketches and easily upload them. One of my favorite Milanote features is the ability to share your board and collaborate in real time. All I have to do is click the share button and send an invite. Milanote is available for free with no time limit, so if you want to go check it out, sign up for a free Milanote account with the link in the description. Thanks to Milanote for sponsoring this video. I'm telling you, you gotta start using Milanote. Yeah man, I'm definitely gonna try it out. Initially, I was just gonna have 2 boards at the top be the ones that lift up. But now that I've extended the top by 1 board, there's actually gonna be 3 boards that raise up. And I need to figure out how to attach all of those together while still having that 1/4 inch gap. And to attach all 3 boards, I'm gonna use this 1/2 inch sheet of plywood, but I don't wanna see the plywood through those gaps, so I need this panel to be black. And for that, I'm gonna use some India ink. Dude, I love India ink. The surface finish is fantastic. It's so smooth. I don't know if you can tell on camera. You can still see the wood grain. Pretty sure this is the same stuff that you can use to give yourself a tattoo.
It's a truly funny observation.
I don't think that's part of the plan today though. Comment if you think I should get a tattoo of my logo.
Before I could fasten all 3 boards to the black panel, I needed to add a gentle 1/8 inch round over to all of the edges, which also helps hide any inconsistencies with my jigsaw cutting. I spread wood glue on the bottom of the maple boards, making sure not to glue too close to the edges because we don't want any squeeze out. There was no good way to clamp these down, so I used this heavy lead weight to hold everything from moving. It was time to figure out the lifting mechanism that will reveal the hidden compartment inside of the table. And the strategy I went with was to create these telescoping risers, much like the legs of a standing desk.
Now that I have the base glued up and all of the boards cut for the top, I need to figure out how to actually lift this table up and down. And for that, I'm gonna use some linear actuators. A linear actuator transforms the rotational movement of a motor into linear movement. And this one extends 12 inches. So all of these pieces that I cut with the mitered edges are gonna form a box that encases these linear actuators because this doesn't look very good.
These needed to look nice, as they'd be an extremely visible part of this table, so I tried my best to be precise when making these mitered joints. I am not the best at making mitered boxes, and I definitely should have made a test cut to make sure the saw was dialed in, because as you'll see, they weren't the tightest corners.
This box is the outer part of the riser, so this is what's going to be visible. And these pieces go together, and then they slot inside of the outer piece. These risers are probably the most important part of this build, because they determine how smoothly the top of the table lifts up and down.
Upon my first test fit, I immediately got the pieces stuck together, which told me that I needed to sand down the internal piece. Once sanded, I applied paste wax to both the inside and outside pieces, which will make it slide more smoothly. Now remember how I said that the mitered corners didn't turn out so well? This is one way to try to fix it. By rubbing a screwdriver on the edge, you force the wood grain together to close the gap. But as you'll later see, I wasn't satisfied with the result.
So remember how I said that I did too many curve cuts for the corners? Well, I need to do something about that right now. Because those curve cuts are not fully closed because there's too many of them, these corners are not very strong. So that means I need to start adding some reinforcements to this base if I don't want it to break. As you can see, right near the seam, if I hold up a straight piece of wood, there's quite a gap, and that's because this isn't straight. But if I glue this piece of wood in and screw it, it's gonna tighten that up and straighten this board out. Hey man, I think you should add some screws. It's not gonna be strong enough. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I feel like glue would be enough, but I guess I'll throw a couple screws in. Whatever you say, man. Can't forget my, my mask. These curves on each corner are still kind of flexible. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use these squares and I'm gonna clamp it up. Now I can use this other square to check the other corners. Now, if these two are square, theoretically the other one should be.
Something that I've realized in my years of building things is that even though I've done all of these techniques before and I'm pretty good at some of them, it doesn't necessarily get easier to execute them because I haven't taken the time to create organized systems, where I keep my tools, how I plug them in, where I store my glue and tape. So there's always been a certain level of friction in my process. It's a real challenge to create systems when you're always on to the next project. Life is a constant stream of things you have to do, and so if you don't intentionally slow things down to reorganize, this friction will follow you wherever you go.
Finally time to veneer this thing, and this is gonna make it look a whole lot better because right now with just the plywood where I've sanded through the top layer, it looks pretty bad. But I bought this 4x8 sheet of maple veneer that's paperback, and just the same as how I made my nightstand, we're gonna use contact cement to adhere it to the base. So remember how I ran into the issue of the 8-foot section of plywood not spanning the whole way around? That also means that the 8-foot section of veneer won't reach all the way around. So instead of having the veneer grain go horizontal, I'm gonna have it be vertical.
There's things I've told myself I'd build for better organization for years now, and I still haven't gotten around to it. I guess that's just how life goes. It takes intentionality to stop the flow for enough time to get organized. Now this contact cement is serious business. Once the two glued surfaces touch, there's no going back. And that's exactly what happened. The veneer touched down in the wrong spot, and the only way to peel it apart is with the heat gun. I sat there heating and pulling for a good 20 minutes until finally, I got it. With some solid mistakes made, I got back to rolling on the veneer, this time much more carefully. This is one of those scenarios where my overconfidence got in the way. I thought to myself, I've used this technique of applying veneer on at least 4 projects, so what could go wrong? There's just certain things you always have to take your time with, and veneering is one of them. I flush trimmed the edge of the veneer, and then to conceal the edge of the plywood, I glued on some solid maple edge banding. Remember how those 45-degree joints on the risers had some gaps, which I tried to fix with the screwdriver trick? Well, I finally admitted to myself that they weren't going to look good no matter how many tricks I had up my sleeve. So I decided that the best and cleanest result would be to veneer the outer faces of the boxes.
So I messed up pretty bad here. While I was trimming these edges off, I noticed that there's a lot of bubbling and warping in the veneer, and I know exactly why. I left the base out under a tarp while it was raining, and that humidity is what's caused this to bubble up.
It's not the heat. It's the humidity.
and it looks really bad. So I'm wondering if I get a piece of wood like this and really put some force into it, will those bubbles stay down? The real question is, are these bubbles on the corner gonna stay down? I'm pretty confident that if I'd kept this inside, it would have been totally fine. It seems to be holding. I just needed a lot of pressure, I think. That is much better. There's still some tiny bubbles, but I think I can get those with a little bit more work.
When I saw the bubbles in the veneer, I thought for sure that the entire base was ruined. But after spending about half an hour rolling the veneer with more pressure, most of the bubbles were gone. I had reached a turning point in this project. Up until now, everything in the build was independent of each other. The base, the risers, and the top. But no matter how much I wanted to delay it, the problem-solving stage of this build had arrived, where I needed to miraculously combine all these elements to create a coffee table with a secret compartment. The first problem I had to address was how do I mount the linear actuators within the risers so that it can lift the table up and down. I sketched, I took measurements, and I developed a CAD model which I sent to my Bamboo Labs 3D printer. And after a few hours of printing, I had 4 mounting brackets that would hopefully solve the problem.
The time has finally come to try and figure out how to make this table lift up and down with the linear actuators. Luckily, I was able to get these brackets right on the first try, and so these will be able to hold down the linear actuators. But I've run into a bit of an issue, which is that these are too long to fit inside the base of the table. There is this piece of metal sticking off of the bottom, which is meant for mounting this in place. And I think if I cut this off, it'll have just enough room to fit. I don't know what I just cut off there, but it looks like there was another rod in the center. So I hope that's not one of the moving parts. Before I cut the next one, I just want to make sure that this one still works. The part that I cut off at the bottom is actually spinning. Looks like there's some grease coming out there.
My modifications on the bandsaw once again revealed the internals of the actuator, but luckily it didn't seem to affect the performance. Now it was time to see if those brackets I'd printed would actually do the trick.
Those brackets worked out extremely well. This is very solidly attached, it's not going anywhere. I'm gonna put these two pieces together and test it out for the first time. Oh yeah, it's working. I'm pretty excited about this project right now. Those are the moments in the project that keep me going. So I've just set up the 2 risers with the middle part of the coffee table to see how it looks. And I realized that I don't really like how sharp these boxes look. It would be really nice to have a slight round over on these edges, but the problem is this is a mitered box made out of plywood, so if I try and round that over, it's gonna expose the inner layers of the plywood, and that's not gonna look good. What if I take a solid piece of maple and glue it to the sides? And now I have quite a bit of room to add any edge profile that I want. Obviously, this piece is a little bit too thick, so I'm gonna
This is a prime example of how building things is all about fixing the problems you've created for yourself. I did a poor job of constructing the riser box, but in the end, adding these pieces of solid maple will allow me to round over the edges, which is something I wouldn't have been able to do before. Sometimes the fixes to your mistakes become an intentional part of your process and part of your toolkit for the future. I love when that happens. So the inside of the base won't be visible except for when the table lifts up and down, but I wanted to make sure it wasn't visually distracting, so I painted the inside flat black. Because you'll see the tops of the risers in between the curved gaps of the tabletop, I dyed them black with India ink. I drilled out some holes to accommodate the bottom of the actuators, and it was finally time to install the risers in the base of the table.
Good. How's it going today for you? Time to see how well this slides up and down. It's pretty good. So now it's time to glue on these final boards.
As I head into my final year of studying design in school, I've started to think more about how design relates to what I want to build. I've always been drawn to the impractical, the furniture pieces with novel and fun features. If it weren't for filming a video, I'd have an awful hard time justifying some of these designs to myself. But I truly think that the world needs more fun in the function of things. Objects that spark joy and curiosity but are also useful. So often it's one or the other, and my goal is to land somewhere in the middle. The last remaining piece of this build was the bottom shelf that'll create the hidden storage. I thought about making this with 3 separate boards to mimic the top, but instead I went for one solid maple glue up in lieu of complicating things.
It's a little bit too tight on the side for me to move it to where it needs to be, so I think we need to do some adjustments. This is stuck on here pretty good. Oh, what the f have I done here? Getting a little bit frustrated. Holy smokes. I've been at this for 20 minutes now. Let's go. Finally got it off. Time to give this another shot here. Okay. Yeah.
With all of those shenanigans out of the way, I coated the entire table with wipe-on poly, which is my go-to wood finish. I added this tiny rocker switch and connected it to the control board for the actuators. I won't go into detail about the electronic setup for this, but I've added links below to the exact products I used to wire it up in case you're curious. The one thing I will point out is that I added a limit switch for the LEDs, so when the table goes down, it turns the LEDs off. The final thing left to do was lifting the center of the table onto its base and slotting it into the riser posts. And with that, this build was complete. I couldn't be more pleased with how this turned out. I think I achieved my goal of making a coffee table with an element of surprise. I want to thank Millinote for sponsoring this video, my parents for helping me move the table countless times, and my professor Tom for the independent study. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.